103, let's talk writing. Enough chit chat.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get into questions, what is going on in the world of Alida and Word Essential? What's going on?
Well, I've got some workshops coming up. So, at when is it? March 2nd, right?
Hmm.
Is um weaving together character, plot, and theme. So it's a single session, single subject workshop. So we're going to talk about the role theme plays in your narrative and how to make sure you've got those three critical elements of your story working together so that you aren't just heavy in one area or another, but you're really creating that tapestry of narrative. Let's go with the weaving metaphor. And then at the end of March, I've got making your readers feel with and for your character, which is all about stakes and tension, right? Because you can have your protagonist moving through your plot and lots of stuff is happening, and that stuff might even be high stakes. But if your reader doesn't have a strong enough empathetic connection with your protagonist to really respond to what you're putting on the page, then your writing is ineffective. Your plot falls flat or isn't convincing or just doesn't connect with the reader as strongly. So there you go. That's what those two are about. And then in April, of course, is Memory, Emotion, Body, which is an immersive weekend virtual retreat. So think of it as a staycation for your writing. And we're going to focus on tapping into the writer's own unique wellspring of material, which is our emotional um, experiences, the the stuff that gets locked into our memories that's, tricky and sticky, kind of hard to get out. And of course, the physical experiences. So bringing those stories that we want to put them out into the world, but they're hiding in the shadows, right? It's really about those stories, and it's for fiction and memoir writers. So, and there's more information on the website, and you can also pop me an email if you aren't sure if that's for you or not.
Yes. And if you were paying attention, you note that March 2nd is typically our Ask Alida for the month. And so instead, Alida will be teaching that workshop, and we will be moving Ask Alida to March the 9th. So lots of opportunities to get learning in March. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and start with an opening question. So if you guys have any questions, or Kristen, if you have anything you want to talk about this week, let us know in the chat. Um, but my opening question, my kind of, what do you call it, icebreaker, is, are you a one idea at a time writer, or do you find yourself drawn to different things as you work on one project and pulled in many different directions?
Mm. So, idea or project? Because they're different
You
things.
could take it either way. You could take it either way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'd like to focus on one project. I like to be immersed in it and work on it. But I also find that can be hard to do because my projects tend to be research intensive and um, what I'm working on now, what I've been working on for years is literary historical, so a lot more focus on the prose. I've started sending chapters to a critique group, so then I'm kind of writing and revising and writing and researching, right? So then while I'm doing that, I've got other projects, you know, trying to kick me in the butt and trying to get me to focus on those as well. So the third Skog book, the next craft book, um, and then getting Saving Annabelle, which is literary historical, out into the world. So I've got a lot going on creatively as a writer this year. And part of me just really wants to hunker down and keep working on Evelyn on the current work in progress. But I know if I do that, I won't get the third Stockholm book out and I won't get the
Right.
plot book out. So yeah, yeah. I just need a clone. Just clone me a few times.
So in your heart of hearts, you'd be a one idea at a time person, but because of the schedule and the way you're working the writing, you're not.
Yeah. You know, when I was getting my MFA, um, I had to write my novel. That was my thesis project, right? So that was very much intense, immersive, long form fiction. But at the same time, I was still a student. And so I had to read books and write papers and, fulfill story prompts and other assignments while I was also working on my novel. And I think there's great benefit to doing side projects if they aren't too similar to and detracting from your main project. So if you're working on a novel and it's taking months or years, as they do, then you're in one narrative, you're in one setting, you're with one cast of characters. And I think it can refresh things if you do little
Mm-hmm.
side projects, if you write some short stories, and not just free writing prompts, but actually with a mind to engaging and being involved with a different project, the narrative, the characters to do that work of development and really see it through. But something like a story or an essay where it's going to take days or a couple of weeks, and you can maybe do it in addition to your main writing project instead of stopping and starting the main one,
Mm.
you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
I'm not
that.
doing that at the moment, but I have done that in the past, and I think there's great benefit to it.
Yeah, kind of like a reset on the writer brain. That's an interesting,
Hmm.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm going to jump into my main topic for today. We're going to talk about crafting scenes, that all important building block. I found myself messing around with some scenes in my opening of my book, and I was like, this would be a good thing to ask a few questions about. So we're going to lay the groundwork, and then we're going to get into a little nitty gritty in terms of what I'm dealing with right now. So, first of all, how would you define a scene? What is a scene as a building block of story?
So a scene is the smallest unit we think of in terms of our narrative. You've got scenes within chapters, chapters within movements. If a book might have parts, it might not in the book in the series. And so you can sort of think of um, scene as the base unit, right? And a scene, all of these units are boxes, they're containers that we put parts of our story into. And so we want like with like. So in terms of the scene, you've got, a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And often the container, the shape has to do with a break in your character's movement. So we've got a time break or a setting break or a shift in who's on the stage. If you think in terms of theater and you think about when the lights go down, but the curtain doesn't drop, right? It's not an act. Nobody's going to shift in their seats. It's just that like lights down, lights up. The players have moved around and the action has changed. It's kind of like a quick reset button,
Hmm.
right? So that is a really helpful way to think about a scene. And then the question is, what do we put into that container? What is the relevant material? What needs to be there to tell the story? And how is it going to connect with what came before, what came after? And if it's a beginning scene or an end scene, then, we have a whole nother set of questions to use, right? So anyway, I could probably talk for an hour, but I'm gonna throw it back
That's
to you.
good.
See if
Yeah.
that was
Well, and
adequate.
well, and welcome to Paulette and JQ and Michael. If you guys have anything you want to ask Alita, make sure to drop it in the chat. I'm bringing the topic of scenes, but we will talk about whatever you would like as well. Um, yes, every scene has a purpose. I heard you say beginning, middle, and end. So they do kind of have a full story structure in them, or can you break a scene before you have had that full arc?
So, yeah, interesting way to word that. When you think of a scene, you don't necessarily think of it as having an arc in the same way you think of a chapter or a movement, even, or a novel
Hmm.
having an arc. But think more in terms of, right, let's say the lights go down on the stage and they come back up. And maybe the setting hasn't changed, but we've got different players on the page. We still need a beginning in the sense of grounding the reader in the action. Who's there? Are we already familiar with all of the characters? Do we know why they're together in this moment? Let's establish whatever needs to be established so the reader is grounded, not confused, right?
Hmm.
And then you decide what the purpose, what the action is going to be in this scene and what it needs to communicate. And you take it through that, right? Develop it, create, write the scene. And where's it going to end? And why is it going to end there? So when I say beginning, middle, and end in terms of scene, I'm thinking less of arc and more as the logic that makes it a unit, right? That
Mm-hmm.
fits within a series of other units that comprise the chapter, the movement, the part, the book. So does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah. So leaving a scene doesn't have to wrap that movement or that thing that happened up with a bow. It can have that sort of tension that draws in through to the next one because it hasn't been kind of finalized, just simply through changing location or changing time or changing characters. I feel like that was a question,
Yeah.
sort of.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about without an example, without looking at some scenes and breaking them down, right? Like you can definitely end a scene with that sense of the action is incomplete, but there's the expectation of it continuing,
Continuing. Hmm.
right? I don't know. This is getting a little abstract here.
All good. We'll move on a little bit. So, something that I'm running into right now is I'm running into the idea of I feel like I'm have a scene that's maybe too long that I feel like needs to break up, but I don't know where those natural breaks are because I don't feel like there's a shift in location or a shift in time, but it's dragging. Like the
Mm,
action has not had enough, I guess, resolution at a point to where I feel like, okay, this is a natural scene breaker. I'll break it and then I'll change my mind and recombine it and then break it again and trying to find that point where it's I guess there's kind of a pacing component to it where it's not dragging on too much, but there's also a component of I haven't changed, so why would I break?
yeah. So if there's no change in characters, setting, time, those components, then what is happening with the action of the scene? There might be a place where you can break because tension has peaked and we're going to have kind
Mm,
of an emotional reset and then pick up again elsewhere. You might find a break where you want to do something with your narrative, like maybe the next scene is going to be in flashback or something. Um,
mm,
so you can think about a good place to break a scene in intangibles as well as tangibles, and then I would want to know, why is it dragging? Is it dragging because you're putting in too much detail and it's slowing down the action? Is it dragging because there's not enough dramatic tension here? There isn't enough of an emotional component to keep the reader invested in the action that's happening. So it might not be about length or breaks. It might be about the material in that container, right? So that might have
Mm-hmm.
to shift.
Okay. And there's not really like a scenes too long or scenes too short type. I mean, and we talk about this with chapters and things where it's like your chapter is as long as it needs to be. Is it similar with scenes where you don't really have necessarily like a word count? I want to say word count because that's a way of measuring length of time in a book, right? But
Right,
it's more like where someone's reading a
right.
scene and it starts to feel like, wait, where is the break or where's the breath or or they're reading a scene. It's like, wow, that was a really short scene. There's no like right or
Mm-hmm.
wrong in terms of length there, right?
Correct. Yeah, there is no right or wrong. So there are certain genres, and I'm sure certain teachers who would say you want to have, this kind of rhythm for pacing. And so you want all your chapters to be no more than 5 pages long if you're going for a fast-paced book, or you want whatever. I don't ascribe to any of that. I think our stories have a rhythm that is organic to the story being told, right?
Hmm.
And you could have a single scene chapter that's 10 pages long, but if it moves, if it breathes, if the reader's engaged for the whole 10 pages, then who can say that's wrong, right?
Hmm.
Now, it can be nice to have a kind of symmetry where you've got that 8 to 12 page typical chapter length. So the reader kind of has a rhythm, they kind of know at the chapter break what's ahead, and then to break that up so it doesn't become stagnant, right? So every so often you've got a very short chapter, or you might have one or two longer chapters, but I say that with a caveat that I never want to give someone prescriptive advice. So if that's the way your writing is turning out and it's working for your story and you aren't trying to shoehorn anything into a mold, then that's great, right? But I definitely would not want anyone to say, okay, I need to have 5,000 words every single chapter with, 300 word variants. And that's how I make a good book, because that's not true.
Right. Well, and I feel like the length of your scene does affect, well, visually, how you read it on the page and maybe how you feel about like, whether that's again, like the pacing of the book, like, is it frenetic? Is there like jump cuts all the time? Or if you're kind of like sinking into a scene and really like luxuriating in this stretch of time in the book. So
Hmm.
is it, like that prescriptive advice of, this many words or this many pages feels like that would take away from that effect that you're trying to create within your book.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And, as writers, we get to make the rules, and then we have to abide by the rules that we make. So if I'm writing a story that um, has this type of narrative voice where the language is maybe a little quicker, a little more copy, description is present, it's there, but it's not going to be, really flowing. I'm not going to get into page long paragraphs or anything like that. And I want that feel because it suits the story, it suits the character. Then whatever I do to create variation, it should not feel jarring. It should continue
Hmm.
to flow, right? So if you've got, the problem you presented, Catherine, of having a scene that seems to be running along too long, I'd want to know, how does it fit in the larger narrative? Is it breaking up a rhythm that you've established in a way that's a negative instead of a positive? And if so, why? You've
Mhm.
got to do the work of assessing what's on the page and seeing if it's an issue with dramatic tension, emotional resonance, or something more mechanical, like um, putting backstory somewhere it might not belong, or backstory that could be broken up and spread out, or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And in my case, mine's in the opening few chapters, and so I feel like I'm maybe trying to over explain in the middle and not allowing the action to talk for itself. But I it's one of those things where it's like I want to trust my instincts, and I feel like my instincts are leading me maybe not astray, but where they aren't quite sure. And so,
Mm,
do you, I mean, other than like a storyboard, and like laying my
uh-huh.
scenes out, um, what kind of tools for evaluating that do you do you think I could use? I
You just,
should say I
yeah,
shouldn't say other than a storyboard.
yeah, I'm like, you just took a storyboard off the table, Catherine.
Maybe more
Um,
appropriately, how could I use my storyboard and what details would I put in there to evaluate where that scene might be dragging or could be broken up into two scenes or maybe even eliminated entirely?
yeah, well, let's leave the storyboard aside. I mean, that's always a great tool, but for this particular problem, it might even be more helpful to look at the scene as a whole and maybe get three or four highlighters, and
Mm,
then try to read it like a reader who's never seen it before instead of like yourself, like the writer, and have a highlighter for pace, right? Is there somewhere I'm starting to lose interest because it's dragging, because the action has slowed down too much? Mark it, circle it, whatever, and just note that, right? And then character, confusion, have a color for confusion, right? Like, is there anywhere I'm unsure what's happening because something isn't on the page, or because there are too many moving parts on the page, or because this bit of world building maybe isn't as pertinent as I first thought it was to the reader right here, right now, pertinent to the story, or it wouldn't be there, but maybe right here and right now isn't the right place. And then,
mhm.
yeah, so just go through and anything you notice, mark it. And then you've got to do
Yeah.
round two of assessment and say, okay, what is the fix for this? And, if you go back to the storyboard idea and you just make a summary, a narrative summary of the scene that you're writing, you might look for a place where you could change the action. Like maybe there's something that's obscure in the narrative, like your eyes looking at the page, going through the scene word by word. You're in a certain type of flow. Your mind is in a certain type of headspace. But if you see it as a summary, something else might jump
Right.
out at you. And you're like, oh, here's that shift, that change where I could make the break. Or here's that place where the tension is really lagging. And I should maybe take some out, move the dramatic high point of the scene closer, right? Condense the scene, put some
Mhm.
other stuff elsewhere. So, I mean, it really just comes down to an assessment. And man, if you do both of those and you still need help,
That's right. Bring it
get
on
fresh
over,
eyes
right?
on it. Yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right. Yeah. Well, and I
yeah.
like
And
that
I just
idea of
want to say
print it
again,
out.
if anyone, yes, and I just want to throw in, if anyone has a question you brought or you want to comment, go ahead and type it in because we love that and we're here for you.
Mhm.
So, all right.
Yeah. Physical copies, physical highlighters. It changes the way your brain thinks. So that's good as a tool.
Mm-hmm. It does. Yep. We are more creative at problem solving with longhand
Mm,
writing than typing.
yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Sorry, my brain's connecting like 8 million things right now. So There you go. All right. And yeah, and if anybody has a question, now's a great time. That's kind of my end of my questions on scene. I do have a closing question for Alita before we do announcements about workshops and things coming up. So if you have anything, just drop it in chat and we'll pop um, it in and answer your question. Or you can comment, join the conversation. All right. So, my final kind of closing question is, how important is it to you to get occasional dedicated time for your writing, like a retreat or a time away? Like, you talked about that in the beginning with your one idea at a time, kind of an idea to really immerse yourself.
Critical. Yeah. It's the best time of the year. Anytime I can leave home and write, um, it's a gift. I think it's the gift creatives need to give themselves. There's something,
Mm,
even if you've got a room with a door on it where you do your writing, it's not the same. You can shut out your house, it's still not the same. I think a part of our minds is always on what's going on around us. So when you can turn on the autoresponder, leave home, you should definitely do it. And, I think the simpler the environment you go to, the better so that you aren't tempted to go do other things. You don't feel like you're missing out on other things. I'm actually going to be on retreat next week. Um, so it's winter in Minnesota and, I've gotten kind of off season, middle of nowhere Airbnbs in the past. This year I took a pet sitting gig so I can use somebody else's house to sit and write and shut out the world. And it works. There are definitely low budget options for retreats. It doesn't have to be a big thing you put off till someday.
absolutely. All right. Kristen had a question here. She said, and a lot and others have said your first draft can be a mess and the book really comes together in revision. Do you agree?
So sure. I think the idea of the shitty first draft is a powerful one because it is permission giving, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot to be said for just getting something on the page and then fixing it. And that works really well for short form writing. So short stories, personal essays, Substack posts, whatever, that's great because you're only looking at 2,000 words, 10,000 words, 20 if it's a long short story, and it's complete. So you can get it down and then you can dig into it. But when you're working on a book, you've got 80 to 120,000 words ahead of you. And I mean, there are people who can fast draft and just get that first draft down and then revise it. More power to you. I wouldn't recommend that as an approach necessarily. Like maybe if it works for you, great. Um, but there's so many elements that you need to control. There's so many threads to your story you need to bring together. We do a lot of development while we're writing, even if you storyboard, right? You start writing and then you get a new idea and you start pulling these things together. And then, so I would rather do my development and pre-writing, do some writing as that discovery happens, right? Reshape as I need to, keep writing and kind of meld them together so that I'm not forcing myself to ignore the new discoveries and the new ideas so I can get that first draft down. But I'm also not avoiding making progress by pre-writing forever.
Yeah, I like that. Kristen said you need to build some momentum. Yes.
Definitely.
Right. And JQ says, interesting, we're more creative using handwriting. I thought that was true for me, and now you confirmed it. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It is true. There's been studies. that show that people are better problem solvers and more creative thinkers when they switch to handwriting. And so I do all of my pre-writing, like idea generating by hand. And then when I'm drafting, sometimes I handwrite, sometimes I type as I draft. But whenever I hit a problem, whenever I need to problem solve in my story, I go back to the journal and handwrite.
Hmm. I was watching something just the other day about kids and learning. Sorry, and how they're proving that digital learning is not as good as books, like reading written word and writing and physically using your body. So I think that's
Hmm.
all kind of ties together. So our brain works in that way. So
It does. Yeah. I think it's something to do with the kinesthetic connection between the mind and the hand and actually involving the body instead of just passively kind of, you know.
yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Pretty cool. All
Yes.
right. Well, speaking of retreats, Alina has the
Hmm.
opportunity for you to take a retreat end of April. I want to go into the announcements for the workshops and the memory, emotion, body retreat.
Yeah. So Memory Motion Body is coming up April 24th through 26th. So kind of a Friday, late afternoon, early evening to Sunday afternoon, about 48 hours. But man, clear the house, set up the staycation, barricade yourself, and really take time to immerse in your writing. We will have some sessions, some calls when we're talking about craft and going into this topic and discussing some readings, some examples and such, kind of the classroom portion. And then we'll also have time together for writing sprints, but then time away to write, process. You might need, want some like self-care if you're bringing one of those challenging stories that you've been wanting to write to the workshop. And so it's going to be small group, live only. Um, I don't make recordings from this workshop available. They never become like a pre-recorded thing because I want it to be a space where if you've got a vulnerable story you want to work on, you can. And you don't have to discuss it on calls, but if you want to, the space is available to do that. So lots of information at wordessential.com/workshops.
Absolutely. And then you have two single session workshops coming up in March. And one of those is going to bump this Ask Alida to March the 9th instead of March the 2nd. So if you guys want to join us for our next Q&A, it will be the second week instead of the first.
Yes. So weaving together character, plot, and theme is March 2nd, all about developing those critical story elements so that they work together and really build I'm just going to repeat myself, right?
It's
Weave
okay.
the tapestry of your narrative. Sorry, don't have new words for that one. And then making your readers feel for and with your characters is about stakes and tension. So, whatever you've got happening in your plot, if you aren't fostering your reader's empathetic connection with your protagonist, it's not going to be working as strongly for your story as it could be. So, that's what that one's about. Two single subject, single session workshops coming up in March.
Awesome. All
Yep.
right. I think that
Cool.
does it
Well,
for us.
thank
So,
you.
yeah,
Yeah. Thank
absolutely.
you, everyone who joined us. And hopefully, I'll see you in some workshops. We will catch you March 9th for the next Ask Alida.